It's another Fourth Art Saturday video hop organized by Meridel Abrams. Please follow the description box below for the links to the other crafters and artists. This month's theme is hats. Create art or crafts using the art media of your choice based on the theme of hats. I love to wear hats. I love to make hats. So I guess you can tell that I like hats. One of my favorite grab and go hats is a little beanie. And I love this little beanie. I think it's a Canadian product, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I thought it would be nice to duplicate this in another fabric. This right now is a kind of felt. And a very close friend from church, Diane, gave me two pieces of fabric that are just beautiful. It feels like wool. I don't know if it is, but I don't think so. But it's got a wonderful backing on it, and it doesn't fray. This turned out to be a perfect match for duplicating my beanie hat. And the first thing I had to do was examine it and see what pieces I needed and measurements. It has 6 panels around in triangular, and it has a band that gets turned up. It has a little bit of an interfacing, which I can use. I may not need to, but we'll see. And it has some kind of binding to cover the seams. So it seemed fairly simple. What I did then was measured and came up with a wedge pattern for the pieces. The wedges are 4 inches apart, 4 inches wide at the base, just a simple triangle, and 6 inches tall. If you remember from high school days, that's the height of your triangle. So I drew a 4x6 rectangle and created this isosceles triangle within that rectangle. Then I took my trusty French curve, probably bought in 1967 from my high school mechanical drawing classes, and unfortunately it met with a bit of a problem with the iron. They don't go together. And I created a slight curve in the triangle to sort of match as best I could the curve in the wedges on the hat. I cut that out and realized that that's really the sewing line. That's not the stitching, that's not the cutting line. So I had to add a seam allowance to my wedge, and I came up with this pattern, sorry about that, and cut it out. So this now becomes my template, and if you've watched any of my sewing videos, you know I love templates. At first I thought I was going to use this method, which I've seen used often, where you create the whole hat in one piece of fabric. And I think I'm going to do this for a hat that I lost and I want to duplicate it. This is my first attempt at one of these, so we'll see how this works. So that's where we started. And then I said, you know, let me make a sample. And I took my pattern and I made 6 wedges out of some old sheet material. And I sewed those together and created a mock-up. You can see here I used black thread so you can see. It went together very easily, and it starts to look like a hat. And I actually dry fitted it, and you can see that it's a pretty good fit. So that enabled me to have the courage to cut up that beautiful fabric that Diane gave me. Where are the wedges? And I cut wedges exactly the same. 6 wedges. And then I start sewing them together. And let me show you how I did that. Very, very simple. Couple of suggestions. Number one is I might want to, next time I do this, because there's a lot of bias, is stay stitch along here, along each end, or even serge. The other thing is with the pattern, you want the pattern as symmetrical as you can. So I might the next time work with half wedges, creating a wedge on the fold, and then both halves would be the mirror image. And that, I think, is a very good piece of advice for myself. So let's see where we go from here. If you know me, you know that I'm not always that careful about measurements and lining things up, but on this I have to be as accurate as possible. So pinning is important. And I'm going to sew from the bottom of the wedge where I know they're going to meet for the band, and I'm going to pin, and I'm going to pin. Usually I learned from this fellow George W. Trippon, who sewed in the 1980s. You pin where the sewing takes place, so you pin where the needle is going to create the seam. I'm a little bit further in because this fabric seems to be curling just a teeny bit. I want to make sure I don't have to move the presser foot too much. So I'm pinning several times here. And you can see, even at the top, I want to make a little bit of a zhuzh because the fabric is cut on the bias, so it did move a little. That's where that stay stitching might come in handy. The next thing I'm going to do is I have a seam guide here. I've had this a long time. In fact, I think this was my mother's actually. And it's magnetic and it sticks onto the plate here. And I'm going to sew with the edge of the fabric right next to the seam guide. Going to back stitch, take 1 or 2 stitches forward, back stitch. I'm taking my time here. I don't want anything to move around. It's a little bit forgiving because the fabric does stretch a teeny bit without being on the bias. It won't fray. That's important. I see I don't want to hit a pin, and I don't want the pin to distort the seam. Hope you can see this. Now the next piece, oops, going to back stitch. Now, it gives me a fairly nice seam allowance. Somewhere over here is where the stitching is going to cross, and I'll probably cut off a little of this extra. I'll show you. Oh, look at everything's magnetic here. So let me get another wedge. See how nice. Oh, which reminds me, this is not the best lighting for this fabric, but you'll notice the plaids line up, and that's partly because I drew registration marks on the pattern. Oops. So when I cut the pattern out, when I cut the fabric out, I had a baseline right on the base of the triangle was one of the lines for the pattern, and then I had some registration lines to line up on exactly the same spot on the fabric, and it allowed me to make a continuous pattern. Okay, so now here we go. Here's where the pinning is important, and this is one reason why I pin from the bottom. Okay, basically the crown is done on the hat. I'm kind of happy with the way it turned out. The lines seem to line up fairly well. Not bad for a first time anyway. That's pretty good. The quilting comes in handy. Here's the seam. Okay, now I'm going to press the seams open and work on concealing the raw edges of the seams. And then we work on the band. Well, this is coming along nicely. I'm happy. So what I've done is press the seams open, trim them to a very narrow, scant 1/8 of an inch. There's not going to be a lot of stress on these seams because the binding will strengthen them. So what I'm going to do next is enclose these raw edges with some kind of binding. Now I found from my thrift store hauls 3/4 inch twill tape. Twill tape is a wonderful product that doesn't unravel on the edges, and you can use it for all kinds of hemming and whatnot. The ends do unravel or ravel, I don't know. I think it's, I always say unravel. So what I'm going to do is, like in the original hat, run a binding over the seams. This has similar fabric, actually. I don't know what this is, but anyway, it'll cover all the seams. So that's the next step in this process. So here we are. I have the binding on. The raw edges are hidden and protected and strengthened. So, oh wow, I'm getting happier. Let's see, another dry fit. Oh, I like it. Looks similar enough. Oh, I'm going to be fancied for the fall next year. These are my spring and fall hats. So now on to the band. I measured the circumference, which came out to about 26. So I added an inch or two, just 2 inches rather, to a 4-inch wide band of matching fabric. It was 4 inches. To make things easier, I folded the 4 inches in half, so we have now a 2-inch by 28-inch strip of fabric for the band. Okay, we're nearing the finish line here, so I had enough of the twill tape to use that as an interfacing, kind of interfacing like that was on the original. So I'm making a sandwich here. I'm sandwiching the band in between the main part of the body of the hat and the little strip of interfacing. I'm going to use a lot of pins here because the seam has to be small and it has to be very accurate in how you line it up. We don't want any open edges here. I continue that all the way around. Now to sew the sandwich together, you'll notice I'm making a very, very fine, small hem. This is going to be secured again by the interfacing. So I'm lining up the presser foot with the edge of the fabric, and that should be enough. We sew all around till we reach the end and join the ends of both ends of the band and the interfacing. Next, I've folded part of the band and the interfacing to the inside of the hat. This way I'll have a little bit of an edge and you won't see the interfacing, and there'll be a nice border on the outside of the cap. Then I continue around stitching in the ditch made by the seam of the interfacing and the band material. Well, the Mad Hatter is done. Thank you, Mary, for this wonderful challenge. It's not only created in me some inspiration and a step out of my comfort box, but it's given me a new hat. What a great challenge. Here's the original that I used as my inspiration. I added a button onto my new version. There'll be more made in the future. I can see that. So here's my current hat, which I love. Just plop it on. Hides the bald spot. And here is the new model with the pretty button. And I think it fits perfectly. I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Hope you enjoyed this video and this project. Please check out the other artists in the video hop. Special thank you to Meridel, TheMeriAtelier. Her link will be in the description box. Glasses for and if you feel so inclined, please subscribe. Please give me a thumbs up. I worked hard on this. Please share with others. That helps my channel a great deal. So as always, Stay well, stay healthy, stay safe. Do something today to make yourself smile. I will. Bye for now.